we go.
Yeah?
Okay. That's good. Okay. Late.
Okay, rolling sound. Hold on. Season 1, episode 4, the Trebuchet. Take 1. Slate.
Hello, and welcome to the Trebuchet Podcast. I always have this. Okay, redo. What's that? She created a life she loved. It's a podcast about escaping domestic violence. Check it out. The Trebuchet. Okay. Peeps in the trailer park be interested. Okay, ready?
Take 2.
Hello, and welcome to the Trebuchet Podcast. I'm Autumn Nellick. I'm your host, and this is a podcast where I blow the whistle on the DOD, and I basically turn my back on an institution that raised me, and I reveal the dirty deeds done dirt cheap by the DOD, which is short for the Department of Defense, and I essentially go deep, that's what she said, about, sorry, if you've been watching a minute, you know I got a dirty sense of humor and an awkward laugh. That's how I deal with the trauma. But where I was going with that is I'm pulling back the curtain on the military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower warned about in his farewell speech to Congress about the proliferation of an industry that's meant to propagate and perpetuate war at all costs. Joe Rogan harangues about it quite frequently. He's got a lot of male guests that show up and talk about it. Kind of surprised he hasn't had me on yet, but he also hasn't seen this podcast yet. So I'll be on there soon enough talking about this, because if this is your first episode and you're tuning in, I'm a U.S. Army historian published at the U.S. Army Center of Military History. I told that story, I think, in episode 1. Go back and check it out. But more importantly, I also worked at the State Department. I was a clearance holder for several years. Clearance just expired. I just haven't worked in a confidential setting for a minute, or classified setting for a minute. So I don't need it right now. Plus, not having a classified credential in this exact moment actually gives me a little bit more safety and freedom to speak at will. And the DOD will probably revoke mine after all this anyway, so whatever. I'm already on the run. They've already done their worst to me. But today's episode, it's kind of heavy because we're going to talk about the number one leading cause of homelessness amongst women and children is domestic violence. And we're going to talk about how the DOD perpetuates that. And the systems and programs that are meant to protect women and children are simply failing them en masse. And we need to do more, and we need to do better, because the military is a very specific subculture in the United States, where oftentimes military spouses and soldiers are stationed far, far, far from home. And military spouses by default are as well. So a lot of times what will happen is you'll meet somebody in your hometown, and then you'll follow them to their next assignment, or their first assignment, and then their next, and their next, and their next. In my case, I met my DOD soldier in, I'm trying not to call him a DOD deadbeat, even though he is a DOD deadbeat, because that's negative, and it doesn't further what I'm trying to do here, which is educate women and military dependents to escape the toxic dependency cycle of the military-industrial complex. And staying angry doesn't serve anybody. If I slip up, forgive me, I'm human. I'm also going through a deeply painful divorce, but I'm trying not to weaponize this platform in any way, and simply use it to educate and inspire others. And anyways, my heart is very heavy today because I've been helping other women who are escaping domestic violence, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But going back to my DOD service member, we married when I was a junior in college, and then I followed him to 10 stateside assignments and 2 overseas. So our first stateside assignment, he was stationed at Fort Benning, and I was in Eugene, Oregon at the University of Oregon. Go Ducks. We met at his commissioning at Penn State in May 2007. Went and visited him one time over the summer at Penn State. He came to visit me at home in Alaska, and then I went back to college, and he went back to Penn State, where I can't remember what he was doing. Or no, maybe he went to basic. Yeah, and then he went to basic or whatever. at Fort Benning, or like jump school or some sort of school. And then in September of that year, 2007, he proposed, because in the military, it's really common for service members to do like paper weddings. And so that they can, not live in the barracks. Because if you're a single soldier, whether you're enlisted or an officer up to like, I think it's like 02 maybe, or 01, first lieutenant, or maybe even captain, you're supposed to live in the barracks. And the only way not to live in the barracks is if you're married. And, I'm speaking from the Army. My experience is with the Army, but most branches are similar. But insert, your rules here. If you're a Navy spouse, a Coast Guard spouse, an Air Force spouse, or a Space Force spouse, which like you guys are brand new, so I don't know what you mostly, if you're old like me, you've got experience in probably the Air Force or the Army, because that's where most of the Space Force folks are transferring over from. Jump in the comments and like give us the, speak for your thing. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. Bing, 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 bing. And something I'm going to talk about later is like the transformation that I went through, because everybody's like, oh, Autumn, whoa, you look like a totally different person. Okay, check it out down here. It's my website, Golden Otter Divinations. You can find us at goldenotter.us. And I'm going to talk a lot about like my journey and my transformation there. Or bing, bing, bing down here, go to autumnmanella.com. Okay, so where I was going with that is met in May 2007. Went to visit him once in July 2007. He came to Alaska in August 2007. We got engaged in September 2007. We're talking, that's 3 months, got engaged. Red flag. Like I said, I grew up in domestic violence. I did not want to go home to Alaska after I graduated college. I was in my junior year. I was studying for the LSATs, but I was so scared that I was going to have to go back to Alaska and grow up to the home where like, a lot of things had happened. And I just was like, I'll do anything not to go back. But I had planned on going to law school, and a lot of the girls of my women's rugby team were like, oh, don't do it, Autumn, don't get married. This is like a mistake. You should stay in school, go to grad school, whatever. Which education had always been like my escape route from the situation that I grew up in. And if you've been watching for a while, you know that my dad was an Air Force intelligence officer and my mom was an Army doctor. And so they grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, but then they were in the military for like most of the 80s. My dad was in the military from like the 70s through the 90s. And then my mom was in the military from the 80s. So my first experiences in life were being a DOD dependent and like moving from base to base. So I was born at Tripler Army Hospital on Oahu in 1986. And then my parents moved to Alaska. They got co-stationed at what is now J-Bear Joint Base. J-Bear Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson. And it used to be Elmendorf Air Force Base and Fort Rich Army Base or Army Post. I always get both base and post mixed up because when I was little, I lived on a base. And now when I got married to Army, I lived on a post. Whatever. If I say PX or BX, it's same. BX is a base exchange, and that's for Air Force. And I think Navy, you guys use that. And Coast Guard. I think you guys use NEX, Navy exchange. BX is a base exchange, and a PX is post exchange. So the acronyms are more or less the same, but you get it. So anyways, my parents then got stationed in Alaska and then got out. Oh, I think there's a coyote over there. Or is that a deer? Do you see it over there?
Mm-mm.
Do you see it? There's two. Those are coyotes. Yeah, look at that, coyotes.
Where? Oh, I see.
Are they deer? No, those are deer. No, those are deer.
That's deer.
Oh, cool. Huh. Leave it to the Alaskan to be spotting game during a podcast. Deer, coyotes. Total aside, my friend Joe Williams, love this kid, grew up with him in Alaska. His dad was our vet. I think I've talked about him before. He sends me these like animal videos, and he just sent me this one about dire wolves that they brought back, which like I'm tripping about this. Like I do not know how I feel about them reintroducing apex predators, but I don't know. It's kind of ironic that I've been talking about my DOD service member being an apex predator, and here Joe sends me this article about how they're literally bringing apex predators back from extinction. I'm like, dude, this is wild. Okay, so story time. So my parents were military. I grew up in it. They both got out. My mom started a private practice in Palmer, Alaska, where my little brother still lives. Go check him out. His name is Austin Manelik. He's a professional guide And I'm very proud of him because he taught me a lot about conservation efforts and like hunters' rights and First and Second Amendment rights and blah, blah, blah. He's got a company called Mission Alaska. Go follow him on social. And I've got another brother I'll talk about later who's here in LA, which is why I'm in LA. But I digress. So my parents got stationed in Alaska. My mom started a private practice in Palmer. My dad finished out his Air Force assignment at Elmendorf. And then they basically just like started civilian life. So when I was in like second grade, we moved into our forever homes. My parents built a house out in Palmer. But before that, I remember living on base. And then I remember, like, my first memories that I can really think of were my little brother being born. Like, I remember being at the hospital when he was born. And I remember it being, like, a base hospital because, like, everybody dresses very uniform. What the fuck?
What?
Stop. It's reading me. Wait, stop. It's reading.
Is it Siri?
A Bigfoot podcast just started.
Oh my God, are you serious?
I'm not. I don't know how to stop playing. We're back. Okay. So parents got out. My first memories were just like of being a military brat. Remember my little brother being born at the on-base hospital. I remember like what the nurses looked like because they all kind of like dressed in uniform, or they were all in uniform. And then my first like childcare experience was a CDC. Excuse me, which is a child development center. And you can only go to those if you are a military service member, and it's like discounted child care. I'll talk about why that's important later, because when I was trying to go back to work, it was so hard to get my kids into a CDC because I had to have a full-time job. But it's really hard to get a full-time job unless you have full-time childcare. And so it was like a potato, or not a potato and an egg, like a chicken and an egg type thing, like which is going to come first? Am I going to get the job and then need childcare, or can I get the childcare and then get the job? And I was able to balance it with my boss, Doug Lang, who I've talked about, who was just a godsend when I started going back professionally. And then ever since, I've just tried to figure it out. But that was such a pain point for me and so many other military spouses who want to work, but getting childcare, especially at most of these bases where like off-post childcare is so incredibly high, like in markets like DC or California where there aren't jobs near the base, childcare is incredibly expensive. And then in smaller towns like Fort Campbell, Tennessee, where childcare may be more affordable, there aren't any jobs. So a lot of military spouses don't end up working. And it's very common for the military, especially, to be built on a one-income model, which is going to lead me to homelessness and how it is that military spouses end up staying in domestic violence or staying in relationships longer than they probably should, because in a single income, you don't have a lot of options. And if you're trying to leave or planning to leave, it can take a really, really long time to do that. Okay. Shout out to Janelle. This is one of my producer C-Ray's artist's mug. She left it when she performed here in LA. I have a mug, come get it. She's a military spouse, and we actually had a heart-to-heart about the journey of a military spouse and what this life is. And it's hard for me to like talk about what really goes on behind closed doors with people, but I'm getting more and more comfortable because a lot of the shame and stigma is not there for me as much anymore. And I also am having a lot of like closure because the active investigation part of my soldiers' CID investigation is now closed. And so I can start to like, I can heal and I can start to talk about things and like kind of reveal what I'm finding at a pace that's healthy for me. Because like it does trigger my PTSD. Okay. So that's the background about how I grew up as a DoD dependent. And then I grew up in Alaska, went to college in Oregon, met my spouse, like I said, in May 2007, visited him twice over the summer, got engaged in September. And like I said, a lot of times these military spouses get married young or do these paper weddings so that you can get increased BAH, which BAH is basic housing allowance. And if you are married, you get more. It's just really that simple. Like if you're married, you get more money. And then if you have one dependent or 5 dependents, it doesn't matter. But if you have a dependent, you get paid at a different rate. So like my spouse gets paid $600 extra a month just for being married to me, but he doesn't have to pay it because he claimed to be the victim of domestic violence. And his command originally didn't believe him. Then CID did a botched investigation at the same base where there's now 3 cases of sexual assault by uniformed service members who suspiciously were reported to the local authorities, turned over to the military, and then 2 years later each swept under the rug. Anybody seeing a pattern here? I go back to these dire wolves and apex predators being reintroduced to the food chain. I don't know how I feel about it because when you have apex predators running the show, really your only recourse is speaking. So, got married in September, did a paper wedding. No, I'm sorry, got engaged in September. And then on November 22nd, 2007, we eloped to New Orleans and got got the marriage license, did the whole thing. It was cute, but it was, we were young. What did we fucking know? Our frontal lobes weren't formed. If I could go back and do it again, I'd be like, stop, don't do this, wait. But then I wouldn't have my beautiful children and I wouldn't be sitting on top of this RV. So, I digress. I graduated college early in December 2007, two semesters ahead of time, to save on my student loans because I was really, really, really dead set on not going into debt. And then, and also not letting that be a thing that my abuser in my home, my stepfather, could use against me later. Like, well, we paid for your university and all that. And so I just really wanted to he was like my escape, right? Like he was my savior. He was the person who's like my knight in shining armor. He's this, second lieutenant in the Army. And when my older brother introduced us, it was graduation weekend at Penn State in May 2007. And my brother was wasted. He's a big time drinker, child abuse, whatever. That's his, thing. I'll let him share it someday if he wants, but I'm not keeping his secrets because at some point when I start to reveal all of the fuckery that led to me being on this roof, his alcoholism and his time as an Army officer will come into play. So I'm laying the backstory before I really dig in. Also, if you're just into stories, I feel like I was talking to somebody, they're like, dude, you're a lieutenant colonel's wife and you're just spilling the tea. And I was like, yeah, it's kind of like going behind closed doors of a secret society. Some people are like, she's a better Betty, but I'm like, I'm not though, because I loved my time as a military spouse. And my military spouse girlfriends are like the thing that I have brought out of that. And so many military officers, good people. And the shitty ones, fuck off. You guys can just suck my dick and go away, respectfully or not. I just don't care because the people who showed me who they were. And the cool ones get to stay in my life and into this next chapter. And the not so cool ones, just go away, respectfully. And also, when your kids are older, I'll just refer them to this content. And I'll be like, hey, remember how I was your kid's godmother when you benefited from me being their godmother? Yeah, I'm still their godmother. And your behavior during this period of my life, not okay. And when they are all 18, I'll be getting a call. I'll be sending them letters. I'll be like, hey, if this is your name, I'm your godmother and or I knew you when I was friends with your mom. Because I am still friends with all these moms who are all divorcing DOD in mass. There's a lieutenant colonel button where we get there and we're just eject, we're out, fuck it, we gotta go. Because that's when they really get nutsy Fagin, as my psychotic grandma used to say. Means crazy. Okay. I digress. My brother, who's the alcoholic. And I've got so many brothers that just assume it's one of them. I've got 5 brothers, so I'm not going to name names except for Austin because he's the shit. He's the GOAT and he's Mission AK and he has stood by me in this process and just been a solid dude, bro. Okay, so the brother who's an alcoholic, just blasted, just totally wasted, comes up to me in a bar. Autumn, this is your future husband. Deadbeat, this is your future wife, Autumn. Get to know each other, see you at the wedding. And I used to joke about that and tell everybody in the military when we travel, it was always my little Army wife story. Oh, how'd you guys meet? It was an arranged marriage. Ha ha ha. I used to tell that joke and it was funny. It hit as a banger. But then we like started living overseas in like Africa. And they were like, what was your dowry? I was like, oh, wait, no dowry, no goats. Like, no, nothing. And the joke was, and every year on my birthday, my brother, the alcoholic Army officer, used to call my ex and say, thanks for taking her off our hands. Thanks for, not having to deal with her anymore. Which like now looking back, like that was his trauma. He was the oldest brother that was still in the home when we were kind of like going through my parents' divorce. Because, shocker, my parents' military divorced, which like divorce in the military is so high. It's so prevalent. And because of this constant lifestyle change, constant moving. Anyways, where was I going with that? I don't know where I was going with that. Where was I going with that? He introduced me to my husband, used to tell that joke, stopped being funny. We got married. And then that's when the adventure started. So let's see. First duty station, he was at Fort Benning. I was still in college at University of Oregon. Then we moved to Fort Huachuca, where he did like BOLIC 2, I think it's called, like the basic officers, something. So that's when he was a second lieutenant. And then his first duty station was Hawaii. As soon as we got there, we bought a condo, which was the smartest piece of real estate advice anybody ever gave me. Later, I will talk about how my DOD deadbeat then forced us to sell the house that we like upgraded to, and then put all that money in an escrow account and then spent it on lawyers after I had originally said to him, I didn't want alimony, I didn't want child support, I didn't want anything, but he couldn't handle the fact that I was done with the marriage and was like extremely embarrassed. So he took his end game to this like really psychotic winner takes all level, which I blame the DOD for, because I basically turned into ISIS. I turned into like I was the Taliban. Like I needed to be destroyed, which is really scary. And it just shows the psyche and like the depravity of what happens to these soldiers, how you could be like the mother of their children and then one day and then the next day just literally be the enemy, simply for wanting to not be with them anymore because of said psychoses. Okay. First duty station, Fort Huachuca, and then Fort Huachuca, Arizona, Schofield Barracks, Hawaii. And then Fort Huachuca was 2007 till 2008. Hawaii was 2008 till 2011. Then back to Fort Benning, 2011, where he went to Ranger School. That's when things really started to get like, and he had begged me to go SFAS, which is special forces. And I was like, I don't know how to feel about this. Like, this is peak warriors. He deployed when we were in Hawaii, and I had been in grad school, and it was just like a really stressful time. My older brother, who's now an alcoholic, also deployed during that time. And, I remember where I was going with that story about my older brother earlier. It was, I think now, looking back, he told me that he'd become an alcoholic when he was 16. And it makes sense because that's when he like became the adult of our family, because we were in a home with an abuser and like my mom was just busy doing whatever. And that's like for him when it started. And then we had an older brother die, and I think that compounded, and then he went into the military, and then it compounded. And so anyways, I pray for him all the time, but he's made some like really interesting life choices that make it so that he can't be in my life, but because of his association with the DOD. And so like this programming that the military puts into these soldiers, like it gets into their psyches where it's like soldier and mission above all, even if it means like a family relationship, like a sister or an aunt or whatever. Because I'm an aunt to his kids. Okay. That's where I was going with that story earlier. Hawaii till 2008. Then he went SF8. He did his captain's career course at Fort Benning from 2011 till 2012. And in 2011, he was investigated by CID at that base for sexual assault of a minor. That happened. Claims that it didn't. It did. I was there. The other spouses were there. It did happen. I'll tell that story in another episode when I'm like ready to kind of dig into that, because right now I'm still healing. But lightning doesn't usually strike twice, let alone 3 times. So I'll just plant that little seed right there, 2011. And that was something that I sat on until I was literally sitting across from CID investigators. And in like March 2024, And after I'd been refusing to speak to him, and this investigator looked at me, and there was something about what he was wearing. It was like this goofy little outfit. And like CID stands for Criminal Investigation Division. And there are these soldiers that are like masquerading as like, investigators. And I need to dig into like what their actual training is. It appears not much. And the guy looked like this investigator from 2011. And I turned to him and I said, I can't remember his name. I think it was an Irish name, Patrick Mahoney. I have to check my notes. I said, what? I said, what year did you, join CID, join the Army? Because again, they're like masquerading. They're wearing civilian clothes. And he goes, like 5 years ago. And I said, you look like the other CID officer. And then the CID officer he was sitting with, Agent Marchand, she's female, they look at each other and they go, what other officer? Or what other CID investigator? And then Belle, my best friend, whose husband is a colonel, which is like, I will talk about Kevin Burgess, who is just my freaking hero. He is like literally my savior. He and Belle saved my life like time and time again. And I ended up living with them for months because my ex had me banned from the military base where we were stationed. So I couldn't even go stay cost-free with other military spouses because he had me banned. I used to teach at the kids' school, had me banned. Like he cut off my ability to teach and earn an income, and he cut off my ability to live cost-free with other military spouses, which is so fucked up. But it's part of the tactic. My dad had said that early on. He's like, Autumn, like, you don't realize you are under siege right now by an apex predator. Like, this is literally what he does. He's a lieutenant colonel, military intelligence, foreign area officer, ranger, SFAS qualified, airborne bro. Like the guy who jumps out of helicopters behind enemy lines and goes against the Taliban or ISIS, or like sits at a computer and puts all these like weird things together. A couple of months ago, there was like a news article that the Israelis had sent over to like Palestine. And forgive me, I'm not like super versed on this subject, but basically they had embedded bombs in these cell phones and pagers, and they were just like randomly exploding, so that then the Palestinians didn't know if it was the pagers, like which ones, like which phone. It's like, oh, is this one a bomb or is this one a bomb? We don't know. We're not going to use either. So then they're they're cutting off both the communications and also like they're destabilizing the opponents. And somebody sent me that article and they were like, oh, how crazy is this? Like, are you following the situation? I said, no, but that is literally the type of like Dr. Evil shit that my ex would get paid to come up with. Like he gets paid to sit at his desk and come up with like that kind of stuff that I'm like, oh, that is so psychologically like scary that, and when you're living with somebody like that, who that they go to work and they think of ways to like kill terrorists. They're like, oh, you know what we could do? We could plant a bomb in 100 cell phones and then send 200 out into the field so that 100 detonate, but 100 don't. And then those people who have those extra 100 are going to stop communicating using cell phones because they don't know if they're going to blow up. Sound good? Yeah. This chaos brought to you by the United States Army. Imagine sleeping next to that. Imagine knowing that that is who you're married to and that every single step that you take is being monitored. Every word you utter, every text you send, every email, every single communication is being monitored by somebody like that. I still get scared sometimes when I think about it. And I know, like even right now, filming this, we're doing a delayed release, but as soon as this releases, I gotta go because he probably already knows where I'm at right now. Like, it's not even a matter of he probably doesn't care about me as a human being or even as the mother of his children. It's more that like I was his I don't know, possession. And it's like he just wants to know where it's at, what it's doing. Maybe not. Maybe I'm not that important, but I'm still scared because that's the type of psycho he is to like, get paid by the government to like come up with psychotic plans about like detonating fucking phones and shit. Okay, but again, like that is why leaving military DOD abuse is even harder, I think, sometimes than just regular domestic violence. Because in regular domestic violence, you would have your family or friends in your same community where you could go and you could stay with. But military spouses and military dependents move so much. I mean, look at how many like times I've been trying to tell this story and I haven't even got through all the duty stations. So 2007, Fort Huachuca. 2007, 2008, Fort Huachuca. 2008, 2011, Fort Schofield Barracks, Hawaii. Very isolating, very beautiful, but all the way out in Oahu. Fort Benning, Georgia, from 2011 till 2012. That's when he did his SFAS selection training and Ranger School. And then I actually PCS'd ahead of him out to Fort Bragg. I think it's now Fort Liberty. If I use old names, just drop the new names down here in the comments. They've changed. I don't keep track of them. And then I PCS'd ahead out to Fort Bragg, Fort Liberty in North Carolina, to get to work on a job. And then I was the director of education at a Huntington Learning Center. And I had so many students and their parents who were, they were widows, or their mothers were widows. And it was just like breaking my heart. I couldn't do it. And I was just like, I said to my soldier, like, I don't think I can do this. And we had a lot of family stuff happen then. And so I told him at that time, like, hey, I can't do SFAS. I can't be an Army spouse and do this. But if there's like literally anything else that you could do, like, please do. He was really upset. And he was like, well, I'm choosing you over, my career. And, this is your one time you can play this card and never again. And I was like, okay. And then he told me about this program called Foreign Area Officers, which is it's like being in the military on steroids, because you get stationed at embassies and then you're even further from home. And that's where, like, when my coercive control really stuck in, and like where this situation with him is going to go from the DOD over the Department of State, because in my situation, there's cross jurisdiction. So the DOD only has jurisdiction for the crimes that he committed while in uniform, while stationed in the United States. They also have jurisdiction when he was abroad, but they're choosing just vote. We've invested a lot of time and money into this officer, and we are not going to look into it, really. They're like, oh, we see something, but we're not seeing it, and we're not going to do anything. Whatever. The Department of State, they're a little bit different, because they have diplomatic things that they need to be aware of. And the accusations that I made back in June of 2024, some of them took place overseas. They took place OCONUS. And OCONUS stands for something overseas, continental, or other than continental. CONUS stands for Continental United States. So OCONUS, I think, is like overseas. I don't know. Whatever. It's like when you're stationed overseas. Like an OCONUS base would be like in Germany or Korea or Okinawa, Japan. And then CONUS is like anywhere in the U.S. And so I will dig more into the State Department aspect of this, like as that unfolds. But I've got interviews coming up with them, and I've got disclosures coming up with them. And the Department of Defense's investigative processes are a lot different than the DOS. And so far, I've actually found the Department of State's treatment of victims to be very victim-centered. And they really left me out of everything. And they've been minimally, like they communicate very minimally. And I appreciate that, because it doesn't trigger me and it doesn't stress me out. Whereas the Army, like, over-communicated, but they over-communicated a bunch of bullshit. And it was a very traumatizing process. And the family advocacy program was a complete joke. And just from start to finish at the Presidio of Monterey, just a complete freaking joke of an institution. And if it's that bad at the Presidio, which is like top of the line, it's like the headquarters, the home of the military, like it's their crown and glory, right? Their crown jewel of the military. I can only imagine what it's like in Fort Campbell or somewhere else. Okay. Back to Fort Huachuca, 2007, 2008. Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, 2008, 2011. Fort Benning again from 2011, 2012, where he was investigated for sexual assault. 2012, half the year was in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And then we got stationed in Fort Campbell. Where's Fort Campbell? Tennessee. And we were there from mid-2012 till 2013, because he deployed to Afghanistan, and then I was pregnant and I had the baby. His command let him stay back 3 extra days for me to have the baby, but they induced me to try to speed it up. Like, that was when I should have known, like, I needed to get out of the DOD, because even my births were timed around, like, his schedule and his deployment, which, like, But I was just grateful that he was going to be there for the baby, because that was during the war years when like a lot of soldiers were missing the births, and like my best friend Belle, her husband missed the birth. Like so many women's husbands missed the birth. So I was just happy that he could be there and that his command let him stay for that. So I do appreciate that. Thank you, Colonel Lee. Appreciate that. So Fort Campbell was next, and that was in Tennessee from 2012 to 2013. And then I moved home to Pennsylvania. My mom and stepdad were living there. My dad had a farm there. Family was there. I had a new baby. I didn't really know where to go. It was a super stressful time in my life. And then it was not ideal. But again, like, what were my options? To stay put in Fort Campbell by myself in a little apartment with a brand new baby, and I was like a brand new mom. And I did have some amazing girlfriends, and there is like really great FRGs, but a lot of times it's just like, you're like, what am I going to do? And so I ended up moving home, and it was a really, really, really hard deployment, being home with, 7 individuals. But I had my brand new baby, and I found out how much I loved being a mom, and I was a single mom. Like, I was up, and I have been with all my babies. I am up all night. I did all the heavy lifting. I always changed every midnight diaper. I did every single feeding in the night. I never was that wife who was like, you get them. So I always just got up and did the hard work, which comes into play later when like this DOD individual was like, she's not fit to be a mother. I'm like, oh, so I was good enough to be a mom through a deployment where you deployed and literally left me with a 1-day-old? Like, or 1 week old? Literally, she's 1 week old. I'm like, you left me with a 1 week old and I'm not a good enough mother? Like, are you kidding me, bro? I'm not a good enough mother when you left me in Africa with a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and you were like off the continent. You left Africa multiple times. So you left me in Africa by myself with a 3 and a 6-year-old, but I'm not a good enough mother now? You left me in Africa when I was like the guardian ad litem for other American kids whose parents had to leave. Like, what? You left me in South America with a baby when you were gallivanting all over the region, and I'm not a good mom? Let's let the math here. I was a good enough mom while you deployed and I stayed home and took care of your baby. I was a good enough mom when we were stationed in Africa at the embassy and you went here, there, and everywhere and were on the phone with prostitutes. Yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. And that is where the State Department comes in, because they're very interested in the fact that not just my foreign area officer, but other foreign area officers, which we will get to, the foreign area officer thing, which I am spilling the tea. If you're a foreign area officer, you better fucking watch out. I'm for real. I'm so sick of you guys being overseas, acting like complete fucking dirtbags. And don't think we don't know. Don't think that we don't know. All the wives, we see you. We saw what you were up to. And some of us, our husbands were part of that cadre. And the ones who weren't, shame on you. Shame on you for not diming those assholes out and getting them to clean up their acts. Shame on you for not standing up and saying, oh, you're cheating on your wife? Ugh, that's a bad look for all Americans. How dare you let these assholes go out into the field as Americans interacting abroad and put that kind of trash into the universe and into like America's good name? Like, that is why GIs overseas get a bad name, because you guys get out there and put your dicks everywhere and you're like, boop, 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 boop. Not the women. I will say that. Maybe that's what we need. Maybe we need more female fans who aren't out there, fucking and clucking. Like, but you dudes, gross. Okay, obviously I need to work through some of this trauma. I mentioned the prostitutes. That triggered me. Also reminded me of the Department of State. This could be a long episode. I'm almost done. Okay. 2000. Where did I go with that? 2013, 2014. He was deployed to Afghanistan. I was in Pennsylvania. Then we PCS to the Presidio for the first time from 2014, 2015. It was just 6 months. I loved the assignment the first time. We lived in Carmel by the Sea. I got to walk on the beach with my baby. He took Spanish. And I just was a stay-at-home mom. And I loved it. And then I was a little bit lonely and a little bit isolating. But I did play dates and I educated myself. And I ironically went to a holistic coaching council, 3 mothers class at the NPS Fleet and Family Center, where my girlfriend Ashley now works, who's also a FAO spouse who was stationed in Africa. So in the military, it is never goodbye. It's just see you later to people, places, and institutions. And so it's everything always comes back. And that's my favorite part of doing this podcast right now is there are some individuals, especially you who work on the Presidio of Monterey, you know who you are, and you know the emails that you sent me, and you know the chaos that you did. And yeah, I'm going to talk about it. And I really, 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 really like that, because you're a government employee, and I can talk about anything in regards to your employment. And can't really do much about it because I'm an American citizen, and my tax dollars pay your salary, which means that you work for me and you work for everybody who's watching this, and you are accountable to them. So if you didn't do your job, hi. It's gonna be really fun when all your FOIA emails just start dropping its links in here. I'm just gonna someday just like ding 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 ding. I'm gonna make like a murder board. Well, no, not a murder board, but like a scatter board where it's like this person, this person, this person, this person, and then just like have all their emails and how they all come back to each other. Wondery, when you guys pick this up, that's gonna have to be the picture. Okay, back to it. After the Presidio of Monterey from 2014 to 2015, we did our first overseas tour as a foreign area officer. He was a captain at that time. This is where I'm going to have another foreign area officer who has become a close friend through this bizarre process of me thinking he was a huge asshole and being like, calling him in front of my SVC, being like, did you have sex with prostitutes with my husband overseas? And like, were you having sex? And he's like, what? And ended up being like a super dope human and being like, yeah, so that's actually how narcissists work. They like make you hate people to keep you from them because they're probably the ones that are seeing them do the bad thing and they want to like keep distance. I'll have him on. He's a super cool guy. And then we were in Paraguay in Asunción from 2015 to 2014, 2015. I'm getting my years mixed up. See, we moved a lot. We were at the embassy there, and we traveled to 17 different countries. So that was actually a really awesome time in my life. But that was when the cracks first started to show in my marriage. Up until then, we had always kind of had this like easy relationship. It was just us. But that's like we had just become parents, and he'd just become the FAO. So like everything kind of happened at once. And I still remember the last time, this is personal, but like, I still remember the last time he made love to me. It was when we were in Paraguay, which was in 2000. It was like right before my daughter was conceived in 2015. We'd just gone to Machu Picchu, and we had said after we did all of our IRT travel, which is called in-region travel for foreign area officers, where they try to get you to go to like as many of your countries that you would potentially serve in at a later date in that time. And that's when a lot of these FAOs were like doing stuff that they shouldn't have, especially the single ones. And yeah, anyways, I say that because I don't blame the Army for what happened. I think it's a lot like what Joe Rogan says, how a person behaves when they have no power and how a person behaves when they have all the power are the same. And he was always this person based on how he was raised. And I think the power just eventually got to him. And being like, king of a fiefdom in Africa as the SCO, the security chief of operations out there, just got to his head, and he got sick on it. But I remember Paraguay being like the last place I remember the man that I was married to making love to me. And that, like I said, is probably something I'm not going to discuss at length in this, but I'm going to have to share some of it because I am the victim of sexual assault. And I've worked extensively with rape crisis counselors. The angels at the Monterey Rape Crisis Center are literally angels and saved my life. And I ended up getting connected to them through an Army civilian who went to my church, who didn't end up being that great of a guy and is possibly involved in this cover-up. But he did recognize that I was a victim of domestic violence and sexual assault and needed services that the family advocacy program was not giving me. And so it was through my church that I got connected with them and was able to like get started on the healing journey that I needed to be, but it wasn't the Army that did it. I mean, it was the Army and it wasn't the Army. He knew about it because he was in the Army, or he was an admin in the Army, but then like he connected me with the SARC, Sexual Assault Response Coordinator, because my ex was having to pay his mandated payment that he makes for having basic allowance for having a spouse. And he was like trying to send it to my lawyers in San Jose just to cause me extra grief. And his chain of command, who's the second lieutenant, her name is Lieutenant Kerrigan, who she ended up kind of being a badass in this. I don't know where that ended up going, but she was also like, I think she saw him for what he was. I think she was kind of like, you're probably a dick. Like, yeah, you're a lieutenant colonel. You act really sweet. He's like, if anybody knows who Ted Bundy is, that's literally who I ended up married to. When I married him, I didn't think he was Ted Bundy. Although looking back, I did used to joke like, oh, what's your, God, fuck, I knew it then. I was like, what's your weirdness? Like, you're too good to be true. You're too perfect. I was like, you don't skin cats in your parents' basement, do you? Like, and I said that when we were young. And I used to joke about that to people. I was like, he doesn't, like, I was like, I don't know. Maybe he skins cats in his parents' basement. But so far, I haven't found anything wrong with him. Well, found it. Big time. Anyways. 2015, I'm sorry, when we were stationed in Paraguay at the Department of State. That's when my service member, last time I remember him making love to me as a human being, I became aware of inappropriate relations, which I'll talk about later. I just don't have the stamina to do it right now. But that was like the first time that something like a sliver got into our marriage. And on a personal level, the mission became more important than the marriage. And he would say things to me like, well, I'm just using them for intel, Autumn, and you never know where that, that intel thing is going to come from. And you've got to always keep your eyes and ears open. And knowing what I know now, like, the fuck, this isn't Jason Bourne, bro. Like, you're just full of shit. And come to find out, he actually might have fabricated some stuff to get somebody in trouble overseas, which would open up a court-martial, which he's really dug himself quite the hole, because now there's other people who are like, hey, I had bad dealings with him at a different time because he threw me under the bus to get a promotion. And I always wondered what happened. And I'm like, oh, well, I'll tell you what happened on my side of things. And if you can piece stuff together, which is incredible when you're the spouse and you've got all this information and like you don't know all of the secrets that you told because you just aren't tracking. Oh, that story that I was telling you guys before. Sorry, you already know that my brain is a runaway train. Sitting across from my girlfriend Belle, or sitting with Belle and the two special victims, the two CID officers. And I said, you look a lot like the CID investigator from 2011. And they look at each other and they go, what CID investigator from 2011? And Belle, my girlfriend, goes, what CID investigator from 2011? And I go, and it like dawned on me because I had buried it so deep. I had suppressed it so deep. And if anybody has seen the movie The Fall with the guy from 50 Shades of Grey, I can't remember his name, that actor, but there's a show called The Fall with the lady from that show with David Duchovny back in the day, X-Files. What is her name? Jillian something? Jillian? Anyways, if you go see that, it's about this guy who's like a serial rapist, and like it dives into his psyche. Looking back, that was when 2011 that shit started happening in my marriage, and it took me until 2015 to see the forward kind of stuff of it. But he'd also been to Ranger School by then, and SFAS selection, and airborne school, and 2 deployments, and who knows what other fucking, chaos courses the Army had him taking that scrambled his brains. I don't know that he didn't get MK Ultra. Somebody said that to me, because you think he got MK Ultra? I was like, I don't know, invasion of the body snatchers. Something happened to this human, and he is not who I married. And there are so many women who are married to lieutenant colonels, and it's like right as they get to that point, we're just like, we can't anymore. Like we got to be done. You're not what I signed up for. This is different, This is different. It's like fresh guac versus guac when it arrives at the table. It's got you're just like, I don't want this guac. This is too extra for me. It's extra and it's not good, and I don't want it. Okay, so that was when all that started coming up, and those investigators were like, what? And that was also something that a private investigator, a civilian, uncovered. So it's there. There's a record of it. He tries to claim that it's not. He knows it is. And like, the other thing about psychos like them, like they lie, but it's like, for what purpose am I bringing this up? That there was like a girl at the dog park at Fort Benning, Georgia, who you said was crying wolf to her daddy. Which now that I'm older, like at the time that incident happened in 2011, I was like 23. So what did I freaking know? And I was closer to that girl's age than I am now. And like now I look at it like a mother, because like an 18-year-old could theoretically be my kid, because I'm almost 40, I'm 39, could have had a baby at 20. And I see it from that lens. But when I was 23, I saw it from like a college lens where I was like, whoa, what's this 18-year-old doing out so late? She shouldn't be out, flirting with soldiers at the dog park late at night. And I victim blamed, or I at least let him victim blame and victim shame and didn't say anything about it. Now I'd be like, what the fuck's the soldier doing with that girl? But at the time I like went the other route. And again, it's because I only ever listened to his version of it. I'm going to dig into that story another time because it's like a whole bizarre can of worms. But my best friend Belle was like, Autumn, why didn't you say this like months ago? And I was like, honestly, I buried it so deep, and he made me promise to never say anything about it. So I didn't. I never told anybody. And that was how, when a private investigator finally investigated him for like what we will talk about later, his name's Wayne Autry. Wayne Autry, you're my hero. You told me some things about my soldier that I was not ready to hear. And Kevin Burgess, Colonel Kevin Burgess, and Belle Burgess, fucking angels, literally carried me off of the sidewalk into their home where I was staying for 9 months because my psycho deadbeat had me banned from base. And they were the only people I knew in the greater Monterey Bay area who didn't live on base. And so I ended up having to stay with them because I didn't have food. I didn't have clothes. I didn't have resources. I didn't have anything. Like, he just kicked me out, like straight up, just trash to the curb. But then he would drag me back in and pretend like he wanted to make it work. Would tell everybody, he's like, oh, like, we're going to go through counseling. It's going to be okay. Or he's like, I'm going to make her beg to come back. Whatever. He tried all the things. Tried to get my family to guilt me. Tried to get my family to tell me I was going to hell. All this stuff. Whatever. Tried to get the church. Like, it's too much, bro. So that was the one thing. It was like the scene in the movie when you see the truth for what it is and you can't look away anymore. And when this investigator told me that this is a private, civilian investigator, he used to work for the cops, but private civilian, not military, found out stuff that I thought I was the only person in the entire world to know about. That was when I was like, okay, I have to get out of this marriage. And that's when the cycle broke for me, and I stopped trying to go back, because there was a couple months when I was like, oh, this is really painful and really hard. I've been homeless twice. I've slept in my car more times than I could count in the last 3 weeks. I'm going to the food bank. I'm, on food stamps. Like, this is a lot. I don't think I'm going to survive this. I think I will go crawling back, which is why a lot of military spouses don't leave in the first place, or they eventually come back. Because it's hard out here in the streets. After you've moved as many times as I have. But yeah, the end of that story was, I looked at him, I go, you look like the investigator. And I was like, but I know it can't be you because you're so young. And that was in 2011. So gosh, that guy would probably be in his like late 40s by now. And they're just like, what? And I was like, yeah. But again, it's so funny. The stories that like spouses have and the intel that we have, that once you start working with like other military guys, they're like, oh, and they're putting all the pieces together, and it's like they have this like little piece of knowledge that they didn't have because they've got like behind the person's view. And I'm like, oh yeah, well, he was saying this, this, and this. And like, you don't know what you know until you tell them. And then they are like military officers and they're putting it all together. So that's what I really love. Like, my ex fucked over so many people that like they resent him and don't want anything to do with him because like they see him for the liar that he is. And like, they know that their careers are now going to be tarnished for having any association with them. And they end up like staying, in association with them. They're like, well, his wife was found to be crazy and all that. It's like, I've got no problem being like, hey, Jason Seiler, remember that time that he used you in your testimony? Which is all I'm going to say about that. Not cool. And I do not think if your wife was alive, who was a very dear friend of mine, that would have ever happened, because she would have known what was going on the backside. Very similar to all the other spouses. Notice how there was no other officers that stood up and were like, hey, here's what's up for this person. None of them defended him to CID. So, and I'm talking about CID investigations and personal relationships. So, but I do know that like there were a lot of bridges burned there, and like nobody wants to be associated with their careers. And like, that's why it's like, there's both a culture of silence But as soon as these guys start getting called out and I start saying like this, like Colonel Sam Clyde, he supported my ex. Colonel James Keevan, he supported my ex. Colonel Jason Seiler, he supported my ex. Retired Colonel Kenny French supported my ex. As soon as I start saying these names and this goes out there into the ethers and you guys are attached to him, watch how quick they turn their backs, because they're all military first and foremost. And even if they're retired, they don't want the association. It's not a good association to have, because that's all the military is. It's your reputation above all else. And there's so much reputation laundering that goes on, especially while guys are active duty, because you're always vying for that next OER, which is an officer evaluation. And you're always trying to get the top block. And like, you're both trying to outmaneuver your peers while also stepping on them, while also staying friends with them. And when you have a spouse like me who can just be like friendly with everybody, it gives you access to all of their behind the scenes stuff. And like, I look back and I think like, how many people, just me being me, me being friendly, and me talking to these spouses and me telling him like, oh yeah, they're going through this thing, did he then use to like one up these guys because he had intel? Like, it's so gross to think about that I would have been like used like that, but I know I would have been. Because I'm friends with a lot of people in the FAO community. And I just was always like one of those things that he was like trying to get dirt on people. It's so gross the more I think about it. Okay, 2016, we got back to DC. I was pregnant with my second daughter. And I remember being like 7 months pregnant and opening up my computer and seeing a message from the person who he had been having inappropriate relationships with at the embassy in Asuncion on Facebook. And I said, hey, what are these inappropriate pictures doing here on Facebook? You told me that that was going to stop when we were in Paraguay. And now my heart is broken and I'm super insecure because I'm very, very big and pregnant. And I didn't always used to look like this. So if you go to goldenotter.us, you can see what I used to look like. And if anybody's wondering, oh, how did you go from looking like that to this? Well, one, domestic violence, don't recommend it. I ended up on food stamps, and I lost about 40 pounds through just like diet, exercise, and like thinking that that was going to be the thing that like made my spouse like fall back in love with me and like start treating me decently and making love to me and not hurting me. But, I was naive. But then the rest was the domestic violence. And I talk about all that over at goldenotter.us. So the Trebuchet is all my DOD stuff. Golden Otter is where I talk about my personal transformation. I talk about my spiritual beliefs. I talk about my religious journey. I host like members, groups, and all that. So go there for that info. I digress. And Golden Otter was actually conceived of when I was in South America, because I remember thinking, I'm never going to be in this position again. I need to come up with a job, an occupation that I can do anywhere and make money. And so I started learning about like online entrepreneurship and like remote work. And that's kind of how my journey started, because it was like, fool me once. It's like, I'm never going to let him fool me again. So anyways, we get to DC, where he was going to, what did he do? He did grad school as part of the Foreign Area Officer Pipeline. He was at Georgetown for that. And then from there, he went to the Major's career course at Fort Belvoir, but we got to stay on JDAB, which is where we live, like right where that helicopter or that plane accident just happened in Reagan, at Reagan Air Force, or Reagan Airport, like in January, February 2025. I lived right there, like right along the water. It's beautiful. Could see the Washington Monument. I loved it there. It was the only way I survived living in DC, especially as like a city girl. Or not a city girl, a country girl. And then I ended up working on Fort McNair at the U.S. Army Center of Military History. It's when my kids ended up going into the CDC. And then my oldest daughter, I played the DC lottery. I went to like 15 schools and then got her into a bilingual school. And I would drive her in every day. Like, again, I was a good enough mom when we were stationed in DC and you were going to Georgetown and had to like take the night off to be in the birthing suite with me, and you were pissed about it. Like, there's just so many things that, like, going back, it's like, I saw somebody post something, it's like, nobody fights harder for custody than the guy who played Candy Crush during delivery. And I'm like, nobody fights harder for custody than the dick who was pissed at me that I was in labor and he was missing class and, like, couldn't concentrate on the paper that he was writing. I was like, I think I gotta go for a walk. And he's like, do we really? Like, I gotta get this done. I was like, yeah, bro, I'm like trying to give birth to your baby. Like, put down your fucking computer and be present with me. And that's part of the Army's like sick joke, is when I came into the military, they'd be like, she's the wife, you're the mistress, get used to it. And I was like, no, I'm the wife, she's the mistress. And now I'm like, oh no, I wasn't even the wife or the mistress. I was just the warm bed. And I was the chef, I was the cook, that's the same thing. I was the chef, I was the chauffeur, I was the housekeeper, I was the childcare provider, I was the dog trainer, I was the tax consultant, I was the everything, until I embarrassed him. And just so you know, I didn't even like cheat on him or anything like that. I just literally tried to leave him. And that was more than his ego could take. Don't worry, we will get to that. Okay, so 2016, we get to, or fall 2015, I'm super pregnant, get to DC. He's in grad school in Georgetown, see these inappropriate messages. And I was like, dude, like you said that was going to stop. We were in Paraguay, you made promises. And I was like, at the time, you told me, like, we never know where intel's going to come from. And I'm like, yeah, but, like, you shouldn't be having closed door meetings at the embassy with individuals. And people are asking questions, and it's getting super weird for me, and it's making me, as your wife, embarrassed. And I would respectfully ask you not to do this. So he says he's not going to do it, right? And I find text messages, and it's like, I had a girlfriend translate it for me, and I was just like, what does this mean? Like, and I wasn't looking on his phone. I wasn't looking for that because I'd never really worried about that. But we were stationed overseas, and I needed some information off of his WhatsApp for like a landlord or something like that. And mind you, this is all embassy phones. Like, these were all State Department provided phones that this kind of inappropriate relationship was happening on. And this is what a lot of foreign area officers do. Like, they use government phones to do this. When we were in Africa in 2020, he was communicating with prostitutes on his embassy phone. And the reason I got so pissed at him was it was a Sunday night at 9 p.m. He'd been in the field. And this is when I knew I needed to leave. And I started working with a provider to make a plan to get out. And he gets a phone call, and we were stretching. I'm going to tell a story. We were stretching like this. Like, I don't know if you like nose stretch. We were like, I'm like, you go like that. And it was his turn, and I was down like this. This is funny that I'm doing this like this. And he's got my hands, and he gets a phone call. And I look at him, and I was like, it's 9 o'clock on a Sunday. Who's calling you on your embassy phone? He just gotten home from the field. And he's like, and he like looks at it, and he's like, I got to answer this. And I'm like, and I hold on to him, and I was like, go ahead. Because I'm stretching. And if he's going to let go, I'm going to like fling up. But he's got me down. He's like trying to get up. And I was like, no, you're going to stay right here. And I literally held onto him. And I said, go ahead, answer it. And like, this is the beginning of the end. And this is the position I was in. And he answers the phone. And I hear a woman say, did you get home to the long way okay? And she had an accent. She's Malawian. And he goes, panics. Lets go of my hand, and I'm like, oh, fuck, shit. I'm like in a stretch. I have to like get up. He gets up, walks out of the garage, and goes like all the way to the far side of our compound. And I was like, oh, this motherfucker's up to no good again. It's exactly what he was doing. We were in Paraguay. Comes back into the house. Mind you, this is almost 10 full years later. No, it's 6 years later, because the Paraguay stuff happened in Asuncion at the embassy in 2014, 2015. Here we are. So it was 5 years later. We'd had some chicanery when he was in DC, and I'll talk about that later. But the DC period was from like 2016 to 2019. And then we were in Africa at the embassy in Lilongwe, Malawi, from 2019 till 2021. He comes back, and I'm standing there, and I'm looking at him. Our guards, because we were in Africa, and we had armed guards that like patrol our compounds. It's Africa. Part of the life. And he comes, he walks, and I'm trying to walk, and he's going like this. I'm like, stay, like just like waving me off. And I'm looking at him, getting more and more pissed. And I'm like, dude, it is a Sunday night, 9 p.m. You should not be on your embassy phone. Like, your phone should be off. You deserve to have a life. I deserve to have a husband. So let's work on that. And he comes back over, and I go, who was that? Mind you, he had already dined himself out and told me that there were prostitutes on this field operating thing, because on a Friday night, the previous Friday night, he had called from the field, and he was supposed to be on a med cap, which is like a medical, I can't remember what the cap stands for, but like a med cap is where they go out into the field and they do these medical missions. So like they might fix like cleft palates, or like he had one med cap where they were like doing adult, oh God, this one was disgusting. He came home smelling like something god awful, and I was like, ugh. I was like, what? where were you? What were you doing? You smell like horrific. And he goes, oh, well, I was at a med cap, and I was like, what the fuck were you guys doing there? And he goes, I don't want to talk about it. And I was like, what? And he goes, they were doing adult male not circumcisions. Yeah, circumcisions. They were doing circumcisions for all the Malawian Defense Force because the STD rate was so high there that a circumcision helps decrease the STD and the HIV rate because they can't get those soldiers to stop fucking around. Are you seeing a common thread here? My dad was also a philanderer, DOD philanderer. I think if you look at my IG posts, I've got a few angry posts. My dad and I have like a love-hate relationship. I get mad at him a lot, but he's trying to make up for it. But anyways, that was just the lifestyle back in the day. My dad had 5 kids in 4 years. No. My dad had 5 kids in 4 years with 3 women. And then another 2 before that, and another 4 after that. You can see how I have a thing for losers. You know, most girls who have daddy issues end up marrying losers. So, and I thought marrying my soldier, who my older brother introduced me to, which I didn't finish that story. He goes, this future husband, future wife. He goes, Autumn, he's an intelligence officer. And I was like, what's that mean? I was like, is he going to be like in the FBI? Like, are you guys cops? Like, I didn't get it because my brother was going to be an MP, a military police officer, but I didn't quite understand how it worked. Because no, Autumn, he's an officer. I was like, dude, Avi, I don't even know what that means. We already lost one brother in Iraq. I don't really want anything to do with military. He's like, no, this is a good guy. He comes from a good family, and he'll treat you well. And, he'll get out of the military in 3 years, and it'll just be like a quick tour. I'm like, yeah, all right, I'll take a chance. He ended up, he's still in. Back to the prostitutes in Africa, the juicy part. This is what this podcaster I listened to, her name is Heather McDonald. Like, she was talking about the juicy scoop, and like, this is the DOD tea. This is a hot DOD coffee. I'm gonna come up with like a catchphrase. I think I'm gonna go with like from trad wife to the trebuchet, and like, this is my journey. Okay, so catching with prostitutes. Oh, he was on a med cap. They were doing adult male circumcision. He smelled like burning flesh. And I was like, what is that? And he's like, oh, we're doing adult male circumcisions. Other times they do like vaccine drives, whatever. Which, fun fact, the Malawians didn't want anything to do with the COVID vaccines. They're like, nah, we've seen this horror show before. We're not interested in experimental vaccines. Thank you so much, but it's a pass for us. I'll talk about that on another podcast. Okay, so he was at a med cap. He calls. And I can hear women in the background. I go, where are you? And he goes, well, I'm at a hotel. I said, I thought you were at a med cap on a Friday night. And he was like, no, I'm at a hotel. And I was like, why are you at a hotel during COVID when you're supposed to be on a med cap? And that's like the only reason you're supposed to even be leaving like Lilongwe, because we weren't even supposed to be leaving. Because everything was locked down. The airports were locked down. Like, everything was locked down. And this is where the Department of State investigation is going to come into play. And the fact that like my passport was locked up, like my birth certificate was locked up, my personal identifiers like were locked up, and I couldn't leave even if I wanted to. And I was the CLO, I was the community liaison coordinator. And if I was going to start revealing the domestic violence I was living in, I was going to have to go directly to my boss, who was the ambassador, or directly to my other boss, who was the management officer. And I was like, whew, that's going to be a tough conversation, because I'm the person that people are supposed to come to when they're reporting this kind of stuff, to buffer between those people. So now I'm going to have to be the one to go there. But having that job as the community liaison officer actually got me so many resources and helped me get really informed and learn how to like start the process of escaping. So he calls me on a Friday night, and he's at this med cap, and there's female voices in the background. And I was like, where are you? I'm at a hotel with the other officers. I was like, I thought you guys were all supposed to be like in a tent out in the middle of nowhere. He's like, oh, well, no, just the enlisted soldiers are out there. They brought us to a hotel. I was like, well, that seems shitty, because that's shitty. And that's very like, people are always like on to officers for being uppity and whatever. And I'm like, that's pretty boosh, bro. Like, your soldiers are in the field and you're like literally having cocktails with prostitutes. Like, come on, at the hotel bar. And so he told me he was going to call me back later that night. He never did. And I was stressed all week. So I'm like, oh, he's at this hotel. There's these women. But I tried not to let jealousy get in there. And I was also like, oh, he wouldn't put me in that much danger. But I will say he always seemed to know where the prostitutes were every time we were out in the city in the long way. He'd be like, oh, this is where these ones are. I'm like, why are you pointing this out? Like, why do I need to know this information? I'm not out running the streets in the long way at like 10 o'clock at night. Like, if I ever left the compound, it was with him. Because I was just like doing mom stuff while I was there, or clothes stuff, community liaison, office coordinator stuff for the embassy. Okay, which, by the way, this was from 2019 till 2021. So if you're with the Department of State and you haven't investigated this yet, go back and look and just fact check all of this. We've served under Ambassador Scott and Ambassador, what was her name? It was a female, Ambassador Palmer. Ambassador Palmer, her husband was so kind. They were our neighbors. And then Ambassador Scott was our neighbor. And then the DCM, the Deputy Chief of Mission, or they call it the Charge, was Jeremy. Oh, Jeremy, what's your last name? I can't remember. I'll look it up. So go back, fact check me. This really happened. I was really there. Okay, the end of that story is I was scared all weekend. He came home, was trying to spend time with him, caught him on the phone with prostitutes. He comes back. I look at him. He looks at me, and I was like, bro, what's going on here? And he goes, well, you never know where the intel's going to come from. He didn't say it like that. He goes, well, you never know where the intel's going to come from. And I was like, and like it hit me like a ton of bricks, like just every alarm bell in my entire system. I felt like a million knives in my stomach, and I was just like, oh my God, that's exactly what he told me in 2014 when I caught him having the inappropriate texting and relationship with this local, they call him LES, locally employed staff, which, you know, he's not the only FAO who's doing this. And I've got a pending interview with the Department of State for other foreign area officers who are behaving badly overseas. So I have no problem telling the DOD what they did. Even if they're not serving anymore, I've got no problem, because ultimately you guys are giving us a bad name overseas, and it's just gross, and it's inappropriate, and it's conduct unbecoming of an officer. And the Foreign Area Officer Corps is so small. There's like 500 of them that, like, you just can't be out there being trash birds. Like, gotta clean it up. Okay, so 2019, 2021, that was COVID and Africa. 2021, I left him. I went back to Pennsylvania. I lived on my dad's farm. I renovated a house. I got my teaching degree, put my girls in school, and we were just living our best life on a deer farm. And then he was stationed in D.C. He committed a bunch of crimes while AWOL, because he would leave his duty station and come out to Pennsylvania, which are still reportable. I just haven't decided if I want to report him to the Pennsylvania authorities, because they inevitably end up reporting back to the military. One of the crimes that he committed was at our beach house in North Carolina, and I reported it to those civilian authorities. That was in 2023, and they kicked it back to the Presidio. And so it has just been this self-licking lollipop where it's like the State Department might be the only ones that'll actually hold him to task because he committed crimes overseas that they might care about, and because there's other officers with whom he associated with in D.C. who also committed crimes at their bases that like can be verified, and like other officers who, God bless you, are coming forward and reaching out to me to vouch for this kind of stuff and being like, hey, you're not crazy. Like, here's what's going on. Okay, so 2021, I was in Pennsylvania. He was in D.C. Doing an out of branch assignment with FEMA, the Federal Emergency, whatever the heck FEMA stands for. And then I ended up getting pregnant. I'll talk about that later. And when I was 8 months pregnant, he convinced me to move to the Presidio of Monterey and said everything would be different and made all these promises. And I had shut down my business, Golden Otter Divinations, in 2021, because he said that I had been placing too much emphasis on that, not enough emphasis on him and his career and our family. And I basically said that the only way we could like fix our marriage was if I shut that down. So that's like coercive control, using finances and resources as a control method. And then ultimately we ended up separating in 2022. And all of the chaos that ensued was at the city of Monterey, which is where the bulk of my disclosures are going to take place. But I wanted to like lay the background of like where we were and how we got here to kind of like be able to move forward with like what is to come and what disclosures to come. But we're losing daylight. This was a special double episode. I feel like it's going to be episode 4 and 5. We're going to split it in the middle, and I'm going to do a slate at the end so that we can do that. You probably have a ton of questions. Drop them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer, and then I'll answer on future episodes. But that kind of is the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And while we're talking about homelessness, I spent the day helping a woman from the women's shelter get a job interview. And I'll share more about my personal journey with homelessness later. I mean, I'm currently living in an RV, which just qualified as being technically homeless, like, because I live in an RV. But like, these socks were from Belle's brother last year, 2023 Christmas. He gave me like some socks that were too small for him. And then another military spouse gave me, this jacket. And I had so many shoes and coats and things that like people were just giving me. And it actually took me about a year to finally start to give those on to women who could use them. And I had lost so much weight so quickly. None of my clothes fit. And one of the first signs of domestic violence that my girlfriend Belle saw, she'd known before, but I had kept things from her because I didn't, she's a mandated reporter and also a military spouse. And I just was still trying to protect this image of the perfect military family. She had a pair of jeans that she wanted me to try on. She's like, Autumn, like your pants are falling off. You're like, you gotta like, you can't go to work like that. So substitute teaching. And she goes, here, try these on. Tossed me a pair of old jeans. And I took down my jeans. She's a girlfriend. What would I care? And she goes, girl, what's going on with these underwear? And I was like, what? And she's like, there's holes in them. And I was like, oh, yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, I'll sew them. And she's like, honey, you're wearing holey underwear. I was like, well, I don't want to throw them away because like I could still wear them. She's like, why don't you get a new pair? I was like, well, first of all, I can't afford a new pair because I'm currently like in domestic violence. And B, like I just held on to that kind of stuff and had such a low self-image because money was always such a control-based thing that like I had to ask permission to spend on that kind of stuff. I used to have really, really, really long hair. I never used to get my hair cut or anything done to it because it was just an expense that wasn't prioritized in our relationship. And again, I'm going to talk more about that part of the journey over at Golden Otter Divinations because that's more like personal transformation and like where I went through my personal journey as a woman. And then this space is going to be more for like military spouses and surviving domestic violence and like recognizing the signs of coercion and control and financial abuse and emotional abuse, psychological abuse. And I'm going to go through the power wheel of domestic violence with you all, and we're going to break it down. And eventually I'll hopefully be able to do like Q&As and panels on it. But I'm going to call it now because I can officially see the moon and I'm chilly. And I'm going to go get in my sleep sack, which is what I lived in. I slept in it when I was in my car, and I'll post some pictures of it. And maybe I'll do my next podcast in it because I didn't use the heat in my house all winter last year. And I would sleep in this sleep sack and because I just couldn't afford the heat. And I used to sleep in it when I would sleep in my car. We'll talk about that on the next one. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Trebuchet. Please see my disclosure comment down at the bottom. As a victim of domestic violence, please know that you have rights. And if you're living in the United States of America, you're an American citizen, and the truth is an absolute defense. So never let a powerful abuser threaten you with legal action because ultimately, this is your reality, this is your truth, and as long as you can back it up with people, places, receipts, photos, you're good. Reach out to me in my DMs, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. And for more like intimate one-to-one kind of meetings and assistance, go visit me at goldenotter.us. And then for my Hollywood, because I'm in Hollywood now, bookings and all that, media inquiries, please go to autumnmanella.com. All right. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Trebuchet, and keep the faith. Jesus culture. Wait.